the issue of the fate of the 5 worshippers who were arrested at the Dunamis church in Abuja is generating public concern. They were detained by the police when they attended service wearing Buhari-Must-Go shirts. Civil society groups like Take It Back Movement Nigeria is demanding for their release. The group says nationwide protests will be launched if the government refuses to meet their demands. The organizers spoke about the role of the church in acts of civil disobedience, saying it's the citizens' right to peacefully stand up for human rights.
For the records, it is important to state that since the unfortunate event, which happened 5 days ago, the detained young people have been denied access to their lawyer and close family members, even though they have not committed any crime known to law. It should be noted that human rights are sacred under the law and they remain guaranteed and protected. We therefore call for the immediate and unconditional release of all these individuals and those not mentioned but are facing unjust punishment.
I think church should be a great ambassador of getting mercy to the people that are oppressed. I think the church should be a real advocate of those people that would bring in justice. So if we go to church and we're wearing Buhari-Must-Go, we're asking for justice. I think church should stand it. But the reverse is the case. The church actually took the people that are actually asking for justice and put them in the jail illegally.
When there is altar call for first comer to come, first timer, they came out. The pastor, Mr. Tietie, even said yes, he preached to them. But what happened? The idea of coming out, people wearing clothes, doesn't change the service, it doesn't obstruct the service. It's peaceful and is allowed anywhere in the world.
Now we're now joined by organizer of Take It Back movement, Damilare Adenola, and public affairs analyst, Barrister Frank Tietie. Gentlemen, glad to have you join us in our studios on Newsnight. Let me start with you, Damilare. From what I read, it looks like a calculated attempt by these youths to rope in the church, which is apolitical. I said this because after the altar call, they swung into protest with trumpets and saxophone as they were exiting the church.
I want to believe that if at all a protest happened in the church, it is within the confines of their right to protest. But that aside, the act of the young people itself, by putting on the shirts inscribed with Buhari-Must-Go itself, is in itself a protest, a symbolic protest, which is allowed and democratically permitted. But I can tell you here, with all facts available, that the alleged persons or the unjustly detained persons were arrested while about to take a cab, because a set of them, they were about 10, a set of them already left. The remaining 5 persons were to be conveyed, before the church security officers approached them, unleashed violence on them, and then forcibly imprisoned them, which is...
Yeah, but they wore these T-shirts, Buhari-Must-Go, to church. Why this choice of a church in the first place? And the DSS that carried out the arrest says what these protesters were trying to do was to instigate religious riots.
There are, pictorial evidences. Like I did this afternoon during the press conference, I made available to the press a video where an eyewitness church member attested to the fact that they were peaceful. And in fact, the pastor, that is Dr. Eneche, told Showore in a meeting on Monday that they were peaceful. The only action that took place was when the altar call, when it was time for the altar call, they stepped out peacefully.
All right, you didn't address the fact that they were going up, but let's bring in Frank Tietie. Barrister Frank, let me quote the church, the authorities of the church. They said, "We wish to state categorically that Dunamis International Gospel Center has no hand in the arrest. The right of arrest and detention resides with the government." Your response?
Thank you very much. I think that was a very disappointing statement by the church. The church is a place of refuge. And for persons, whether they are sinners or in this case, these are persons who are totally within the confines of their rights to express their opinion by wearing a certain t-shirt and going to church. The church ought to have protected them. The church ought to have counseled them. What the church did was to cower in fear of the authorities that it is even supposed to speak truth to, that it hasn't been doing. The church is just comfortable playing and maintaining the status quo. And when these young persons who I believe are adherents of the Christian faith thought that they should be able to express themselves within the protective confines of a church, they were betrayed by the church. I don't think that explanation is in fact is unbecoming. It's highly disappointing, and I think that the church as a whole, the universal church as a whole, will not be this strong, will continue to suffer persecution if it's unable to protect persons who run to it for refuge. I just feel too disappointed that the church reacted in such a lame manner.
Frank, let me stay with you. What kind of protection in this situation should the church or could the church have provided for these protesters, considering too that they were arrested outside the premises of the church?
Now, if the church ever thought that what they did was wrong, which wasn't at all, and if the church is a place is a remedial center, and that's why we have a lot of counselors in that place, the church ought to have called them to order if they thought that they were going overboard. The church didn't do that, and the church should have done everything possible to protect its name from being associated with the persecution of persons that believed in it. They came to the church for whatever reasons, whether they came to seek spiritual blessing or spiritual power to enable them express themselves with regards to the opinion they have about the president. Let me tell you something. In this country, we've had a sitting president with a coffin being paraded in the streets of cities in this country, with the name of the president written on the coffin, attributing to the fact that he's dead, even while he was in power. The president didn't do anything. The Department of State Security Services at that time didn't do anything. That was the level of freedom we have attained as a country. And then this President Muhammadu Buhari was a beneficiary of a very scathing campaign against the sitting president. Why would we degenerate to this level in such a short time? We should allow freedom of expression, freedom to hold opinion and express same. And the fact that the church disappointed these young persons is okay, but the state on its own should not go down so low.
Let's get this clear before I bring in Damilare. You are saying what they did. The church is saying they did not do anything. DSS carried out the arrest. We'll have to put that the side of the church very clear. Damilare, before you talk, let me ask you this question. Is there any, I did ask you before that the young men, after doing the altar call, got to the front of the church and began to blow saxophones and trumpets. I don't think you responded to that. Would that be right for them to do that, using the church as a protest ground?
Let me quickly reference to the civil rights movement in the 1950s in the US during the racial segregation. The church played a significant role in the fight against racial segregation. The black American churches were places where black people converge and had meetings before they went on protest. In fact, one of the most beautiful anti-racism statements came from the pulpit of Martin Luther King. So why should the church be an outlawed place to start the protest, if at all they protested?
All right, very quickly, you plan to shut down the church this Sunday? Is that the case?
Yes.
What exactly do you hope to achieve with that?
We have stated during our press conference today that if by Sunday the young persons are not released, Pastor Eneche doesn't effect the release of the young person because he had a direct hand in the arrest.
He says he didn't. That's what you're claiming. The pastor said he had nothing to do with it.
In what way?
because the church security guards effected the unlawful arrest.
They have also said, denying that claim. That is your claim, but the church is saying
I'm going to give you a video.
they didn't.
I'm going to give you a video, and I can give you here wherein a church member, an eyewitness church member, was attesting to the fact that the young persons were tortured. They were brought back to the church and they imprisoned at the back of the church before they called the DSS to take custody of them.
Unfortunately, we
So
don't have
we
don't have enough time. Frank Tietie, would have been nice to. It would have been nice to ask you, Frank Tietie, under which laws, or what charges exactly can the DSS bring, against this arrested 5. But thank you very much, Frank Tietie and Damilare Adenola, for joining us.